All right, it is Thursday, May 6th at 12:08. I'm in the Swedish American EMS office with Richard Robinson for Module 8, Word on the Street, talking about leadership development. And so, Richard, we were just talking a little bit what is our current leadership development process within the office itself?
Within the office itself, it's probably somewhat informal. We typically have various people take charge of different sections of the things we teach, whether it's ACLS or PALS, certain classes, and that gives them a little authority to kind of build things the way they want to while still being overseen by the entire staff here.
And not only just primary, but then you also have a backup to those primary instructors. So, for instance, Michelle being primary for ACLS, and then I'm the backup for ACLS. So in the event that Michelle gets a title change, position change, then there's already a succession process in place that somebody then can step into the primary role of that. And then basically we're just then more or less filling the vacancy of the secondary. So we're never left without a primary person for the most part, correct?
Yeah, that's, I think, very important, because it can be just an illness at the last minute. Somebody can't be here because they're sick. The class can't necessarily be canceled in most cases.
Correct.
So, yes, we always want to have at least a backup, and lots of times there's multiple people in the office who could step in, and take over in the event of emergency. But, normally it's under kind of the guidance of one person for consistency and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So what are some key components? Again, you said this is an informal process, and we kind of touched a bit on it. But so some key components is that we have some people that kind of take ownership of different aspects of the teaching. But what are some other key components that you can think of this process?
Right. And where I said it's informal, and that's probably in our department, it's somewhat informal. The hospital does have a whole formal process of leadership, and as people move up to, whether it's to a supervisor, manager, things like that, there's key courses they have to take through the hospital.
Yep.
But like I said, here in the office, we're kind of a small group. It's somewhat informal. I think we work together fairly well, and when we have new people or somebody takes over, they aren't just, what do you want to say, thrown to the wolves and have to do everything themselves. I think hopefully everybody else is going to step in, assist them, do a little bit of leadership. But I think it's also important to give them some authority to kind of make things their own a little bit too, because sometimes, I've been here for years, and you can get kind of set in your ways too.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to let people have some authority to, at least try some different changes, see what works for them.
So there's not a micromanaging nature, and so I can see that. And when I started here full time a year ago, going from a full-time provider job on an ambulance to a full-time educator job, it was a completely different change of pace. And yeah, the full-time staff within the department certainly stepped up to help acclimate to that role, and kind of help me get the things that I probably never even thought about as being an instructor full-time, the things that I would need. So that, I think everybody within the office did a good job of helping with that. And you said it's informal, but when you start here, I guess how important is leadership development, or how much is it focused on here in the office?
I think that it's probably stressed. I think you have to, because, and you found that when you worked here, that when you come in, you can do a lot of classes, or when we send you out to do things, you're alone a lot of times. And again, we don't necessarily your first time, we tag you up, and it depends on people's level of experience and what they're coming in, so you don't abandon them. But part of our job basically is we do a lot of things, in some cases, on our own a little bit. Again, we have the backup in the office. The larger classes that are here, we typically have, multiple people who are also here to help. But yeah, when we go out, it's sometimes kind of limited with what you have. So, everybody has to have the incentive, have to be able to make some of the decisions, have the authority to make those decisions, because obviously, you've got a room full of people. You can't necessarily not make the decision and pass it on if there's nobody there. So people do have to have the authority. If they're running the class, they're running the class.
Yeah. And I think without it actually being explicitly stated in the the interviewing or hiring process, I think to me, it was when coming into this role, I think everybody here has a certain level of inherent leadership already developed within them. And that if you didn't have it, you learn it really quickly. Not that it's necessarily forced, but like you said, there's some autonomy that needs to happen. And also the, more or less the need to make those decisions when there's nobody else here to make them for you, or if you're out at another agency. So is there anything as far as leadership development, other than having a formal process, are there any topics that we should be covering that we're currently not, outside of the supervisory staff? So you have a supervisor status. Is there any topics that the rest of the staff here should be focusing on or developing?
Probably. I think the biggest one, and that's probably on me somewhat, is a lot of the system stuff that I do. That I take care of that with the providers and things, and I think it's probably time we need to start letting other people know. Hopefully at some point I'm gonna be retiring, and we don't wanna, well, tomorrow you're in charge of the 30 services.
Thrown to the wolves.
So,
and it should be noted that Richard just celebrated 41 years of EMS service through his home agency. So we hope you're not retiring anytime soon, but if you do, it's well deserved.
But and again, it doesn't necessarily even have to be retirement. There's other things. A couple of years ago, I broke my arm, and I'm out of the office for almost a month. I ended up having surgery and stuff. I was doing license renewal. In some cases, at home on a computer, and things, which isn't necessarily the best thing. So it is important. I think we do need to, pass that information on a little bit.
All right. And if there's anything that you could change about our process, what would it be and why?
I don't know. I think we work pretty good together. Sometimes I think we're just busy, and sometimes maybe you get things shoved on a little too quickly. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I think hopefully we're still watching and making sure we aren't burying you and things like that.
Yeah.
But probably a little bit longer mentor for some probably wouldn't be a bad plan in a lot of cases.
Okay.
When somebody shows the authority and the ability to go on their own, they're probably allowed to.
All right.
So monitoring might be helpful.
From my perspective, nothing has been forced. As a matter of fact, it also it's a welcoming environment to go out of your way to look for things to do. And like I said, I've never felt like things were pushed upon.
Good.
And again, and it's not just here, but from the agency that I came to running from full time, outside of being a supervisor, there isn't a leadership development program in place. It isn't until you've bestowed that title of supervisor or assistant supervisor, whatever it is, that then we start to develop leaders. And I think it is, especially in our line of work across the board, it's recognizing leaders, but then starting even outside of that supervisory phase to, I don't want to say groom them, but just, encourage them to keep them on that track.
And I think that's a problem with EMS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, throughout, not just where you came from, it's all over. You basically, if you're working out in the field, you're either an EMT or a paramedic, and we kind of joke when you do that until you decide what you really want to do in life, because what other avenue is there?
Yep.
You either go into maybe management in that particular organization, which is again a very small number of people that can, or possibly into education or something like that. There isn't really much advancement for people in the field.
It's a low ceiling.
Areas. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we're losing a lot of quality people because of that. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that people go on to nurses training or go on to other things, which I think is good for them, good for society, but it's also bad for EMS. We're losing some people with years of experience just because there's no real advancement in where the areas that they're at. So I think that's an ongoing problem.
Yep. And I would totally agree. And I think given how busy we are in the office here with our primary classes, our basic and paramedic classes, and looking outside and seeing the need for those, that's a global issue that until it's, how do I want to say it, until it's more, people are more appreciative of the of the job itself, and until there's more room for advancement, it's not going to change anytime soon. So, but
EMS is still a relatively new career.
Mhm.
When you get right down to it. I mean, you know, as compared to a lot of other
oh yeah,
professions in healthcare. So I mean, it's still growing pains. So hopefully we are getting there, and we'll work on those things.
yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Richard, and have a good day.
Okay.